Welcome back to our news bulletin. The number of COVID-19 cases in Africa has crossed 150,000, while the World Health Organization says the continent is still the least affected region. Meanwhile, Brazil has recorded 623 deaths in the last 24 hours, taking the tally to nearly 30,000. Earlier, the United States reported 784 new fatalities in a day, pushing the country's overall death toll to more than 105,000. Worldwide, the death count has crossed 375,000 with over 6.2 million infections.
As the number of new infections slows, the World Health Organization has called for a cautious, stepwise approach in easing restrictions to put economies back on track. While Europe sees some relief, the pandemic is raging in Latin America, with Brazil, Peru, Chile, and Mexico reporting record cases. The global health body says Central and South America are current COVID-19 hotspots.
Central and South America in particular have very much become the intense zones of transmission for this virus as we speak. And I don't believe that we have reached the peak in that transmission. And at this point, I cannot predict when we will. But what we do need to do is to show solidarity to the countries of Central and South America.
Marriott has reopened all of its hotels in China, and the group says it has seen a recovery in business travel. Singapore is easing restrictions as well. Australia's most populous state of New South Wales is set to open some sports facilities from mid-June. Hundreds of Australians flocked to public attractions as social distancing restrictions were eased.
It's nice to be social again and kind of get back to seeing friends and getting out of the house again and not feeling cooped up again, and the kids getting back to school is a huge improvement as well.
Meanwhile, the UN has appealed for over $2.4 billion to continue its humanitarian programs in Yemen to prevent an unfolding tragedy driven by COVID-19.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported its highest surge in COVID-19 cases, with 3,938 infections detected in the past 24 hours. The health ministry reported 78 deaths overnight, taking the tally to 1,621. The ministry said 27,110 patients of coronavirus have recovered so far, while 824 remain critical. It said over 500,000 tests have been conducted in the country, with 16,548 conducted in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, Prime Minister Imran Khan announced opening more sectors, urging people to follow SOPs. Pakistan says it is deeply concerned over extrajudicial killing of Kashmiri youths by Indian forces in occupied Kashmir. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said Indian actions in Kashmir have exposed its extremist ideology. It urged the international community to take immediate steps to stop India from committing serious crimes against the Kashmiri people. The statement was made in response to the killing of 15 Kashmiris by Indian troops in the last 24 hours. Last month, Indian troops martyred 21 Kashmiris in the occupied valley. Kashmir has been under India's strict lockdown and communications blackout since August last year. Fresh satellite images show an increased buildup of forces at the line of actual control between China and India. The latest images by Planet Labs reveal deployment of additional troops along Pangong Lake in the Ladakh region. Tensions started to escalate between the neighboring countries last month when soldiers from both sides indulged in skirmishes, fistfight and stone pelting. Both sides accuse each other of trespassing into their territory at an undefined boundary line. Hong Kong's Carrie Lam has accused the US of double standards over the ongoing protests against police brutality. Lam said Washington's handling of the protests contradicts its take on the riots in Hong Kong last year. In response to US threat to place trade restrictions on the financial hub, Lam said such measures will hurt Washington's own interests. She did not say if visa-free travel for American citizens could be rescinded in response to any sanctions. Lam also took an aim at Washington's stern response to racial justice protests.
When it comes to the statements from certain foreign countries who have made lofty reactions and threatened to put into place certain measures, all I can do is remind them that they are adopting double standards. They're highly concerned about their own national security, but when it comes to our national security, especially the situation in Hong Kong, they look through tinted glasses. People can see this double standard very clearly by looking at how riots were handled in the US by the local authorities and how it compares to the stance they took when almost the same kind of riots took place in Hong Kong last year.
Now, the US President Donald Trump has threatened to deploy military to halt protests over the police killing of African-American George Floyd. Police and the National Guard are using tear gas and mace to disperse protesters. The murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has reignited the long-standing issue of systemic racial bias and police brutality in the US. Thousands of Americans are out on the streets with the National Guard deployed in 23 states and the Washington, D.C. Hundreds of cities across the country remain under curfews at levels not seen since civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1968 assassination. Officials say one person was killed in Louisville, Kentucky overnight. Meanwhile, Chicago police fielded about 10,000 calls for looting. President Trump has vowed to deploy the military to quell the protests.
Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them. I am also taking swift and decisive action to protect our great capital, Washington, D.C.
In other news, Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro says he will visit Iran in the near future to sign cooperation agreements. This comes after Iran sent 5 fuel tankers to the gasoline-starved South American country. In a televised address, Maduro said he feels obliged to thank Tehran for helping Caracas during a critical time. Without providing any concrete day for the visit, President said the bilateral agreement will focus on energy, among other sectors.
Soon we will travel to Iran to embrace them. Soon I will be in Iran, as soon as the sanitary conditions in Iran and Venezuela allow. We will go to the high-level joint committee to sign agreements on energy cooperation, financial cooperation, military cooperation, agricultural cooperation, technological cooperation, scientific cooperation, and pharmaceutical cooperation. We will sign the documents.
Meanwhile, Iran said it is ready to send more fuel shipments to Venezuela if required. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Abbas Mousavi said Tehran has a natural right to defend its economic interests, even in faraway places. Now, the UN has accused the Afghan Taliban of maintaining ties with Al-Qaeda, despite assuring the US of severing all links with the militant group. In a report, the bloc said the Taliban regularly consulted with Al-Qaeda during Doha talks and assured them of honoring historical ties. The report was submitted to the Security Council by the UN's Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team. It said Al-Qaeda reacted positively to the Doha deal and called it a victory of the Taliban's cause. The report said the senior leadership of Al-Qaeda remains present in Afghanistan with 400 to 600 operatives. This comes months after US envoy Zalmi Khalilzad said the Taliban have taken some steps to break ties with Al-Qaeda. Under the Doha Agreement, the Taliban promised not to allow Afghanistan to be a launching pad for terrorist attacks on the US. Israel has ordered the military to step up preparations ahead of Tel Aviv's plan to annex parts of the West Bank. In a statement, Defense Minister Benny Gantz said a joint team will be formed to bring together recommendations on an operational level. Gantz said he also plans to appoint a point person to coordinate between the different government bodies involved in the process. Earlier, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to begin cabinet discussions on extending Israeli settlements in Jordan Valley and the West Bank. Last month, Palestinian authorities said it is ending security cooperation with Israel over the annexation issue. International community deems such annexation illegal. Turkey says it has killed 6 militants of the Kurdistan Workers Party in northern Syria. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the fighters were killed during Operation Peace Spring. It said the militants were killed near Turkey's southern border. The military says it will not stop operations against militants in the region. Since 2016, Turkey has launched a trio of operations across its border into northern Syria. Ankara holds the fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year conflict. British soldiers accused of committing war crimes in Iraq are unlikely to face criminal prosecution. Service Prosecution Authority Director Andrew Cayley says most cases were dismissed due to lack of evidence. In an interview, Cayley said only one remaining case is being examined out of thousands of allegations made against the British military. Cayley said it is now possible that none of the original allegations will lead to a prosecution. He said the International Criminal Court in Hague is also conducting a separate investigation that will conclude this year without further action being taken. In 2014, ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda reopened a preliminary examination of over 1,000 cases of alleged British abuses in Iraq. The UK and Canada have opposed Russia's return to G7, deepening a rift over US President Donald Trump's wish for the country to rejoin. Trump had said the bloc's outdated format should be expanded to include others, including Russia. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Russia will continue to remain out of the bloc as it invaded Crimea and continues to disrespect international norms. While a spokesperson for UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said London will veto any proposal to allow Moscow to rejoin. Earlier in a telephone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Trump proposed a plan to invite him to the summit. We're now taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. The UN says Libya's Eastern Army commander Khalifa Haftar has agreed to resume ceasefire talks. In a statement, the UN mission said it welcomes the renewal of joint military commission talks. The mission said a return to talks is a response to the calls of Libyans who want to have a dignified and safe life as soon as possible. The bloc said it hopes all concerned international parties will respond to the resumption of talks. It did not provide any details of the negotiation process. The UN says at least 3 civilians have been killed in an attack on a camp housing thousands of Malayan refugees in western Niger. It said some 50 fighters launched a well-planned operation against the Inkatain refugee camp in Tahua region. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees in Niamey said the attackers also abducted a guard and sabotaged the camp's water supply. It said the militants have destroyed the aid workers' space to live entirely. Security officials said before the attack, the fighters destroyed telephone relay antennas in the area. The town of Inkatain is hosting some 20,000 Mali refugees and 15,000 internally displaced Niger citizens. In India, a series of landslides triggered by heavy rains has killed 20 people in Assam. Local officials say dozens were also injured in separate incidents. They say rescue operations are underway. The country is also bracing for another cyclone, Nisarga, that is expected to hit its west coast on Wednesday. Last month, a powerful cyclone that tore through the eastern state of West Bengal killed more than 100 people in India and Bangladesh. 20 people have been killed as Tropical Storm Amanda swept across Central American countries, causing floods and landslides. El Salvador is the hardest hit country as Interior Minister Mario Durian confirmed 15 deaths and 7 missing persons. Officials said some 7,000 people have taken refuge in 154 shelters. President Nayib Bukele has declared a 15-day state of emergency with the damage estimated at around $200 million. Meanwhile, 2 people were killed in neighboring Guatemala. The rains also killed at least 3 people in Honduras, including a brother and sister swept into a river in a car. The U.S. economy will shrink by nearly $8 trillion over the next decade due to fallout from COVID-19 pandemic. In a report, the Congressional Budget Office said the drop represents a 3% decline in cumulative real GDP over the next decade. The report said business closures and social distancing measures are expected to curtail consumer spending. It said a recent drop in energy prices is projected to severely reduce U.S. investment in the sector. The report said recent congressional legislation will partially mitigate the deterioration in economic conditions. Last week, the U.S. Commerce Department reported economic activity in the first quarter contracted at an annual rate of 5%. China's telecom company Pacific Networks has urged U.S. Federal Communications Commission not to shut down its operations. In a filing, Pacific Networks and its subsidiary ComNet said they will not jeopardize Washington's national security interests. They said their operations were independent of the Chinese government. The company said they have compiled and cooperated with the U.S. authorities for 20 years without any FCC enforcement action. Earlier in April, the FCC issued show-cause orders to Pacific Networks, China Telecom Americas, and China Unicom Americas, citing national security risks. Moodys has downgraded India's sovereign rating one notch to the lowest investment grade Baa3 with negative outlook. It said India will be challenged to mitigate risks of low growth, deteriorating fiscal position, and financial sector stress. Moodys expects India's real GDP to contract by 4% in fiscal 2020. Due to the shock from the coronavirus pandemic, it has also downgraded India's local currency senior unsecured rating and its short-term local currency rating. Baa3's rating is the lowest investment grade, a notch above junk status. Moodys had last downgraded India's rating in 1998. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.